feel like, because I can practice on Tuesday. Okay, Plato. Today's art of the week is not an ancient piece of art at all. It is a painting from the 19th century by a French artist named David. It's spelled like David, but it's David. And it is called The Death of Socrates. Yes, and some, awesome, I didn't know. Because look how boring mine is. I have this, yeah, it's really boring, yes. It is the hemlock. I'm just going to put this here so that we can kind of, because I'm going to read a portion of the dialogue that talks about when he died. I'm sorry, Naya, you totally can't see that at all, but I just put it down here. You can't see it. Okay, yes.
At least your cover is functional. I almost passed this over just because I was looking through it and I couldn't find, like I was freaking out because I didn't know if I had your
Euthyphro. Yes.
Oh. Where is it? Yours actually sits here.
Yes,
So,
that does help.
Yeah,
Yes, I should have warned you that it's in a thing called The Last Days of Socrates. The other ones are very, if you enjoy our Plato reading, I realize that telling a group of high school students, why don't you read some more Plato over the summer in your spare time? But they're really, that whole Last Days of Socrates is very interesting. I will tell you a little bit, I'm going to read some of the Phaedo, which is about his death, and tell you what Crito is about, and Minnow isn't in yours, but I don't know where this book came from. I want to talk about this, The Clouds, the play. I mentioned a little bit about it, but you guys were it was the end of class and you were rushing out the door. Aristophanes was the foremost comic playwright of Athens. And so at these dramatic festivals where Medea and Oedipus were produced, they also had a comedy. And Aristophanes would produce these, and they're very, very funny, but they're very topical. So it's like if you wrote a comedy, but it mentions Biden and Trump and Harris and Russia and Ukraine and everything, and then somebody read it 150 years from now. You're like, yeah, you'd have to have footnotes, right, to figure out who these people were and what was going on. And so he makes jokes about the politicians of his day, but we don't know all the politicians of his day, so that it puts a damper on it. So the Genesius Guild in Rock Island often does, plays in the summer. They do Greek drama and they do some Shakespeare, and sometimes they'll do an Aristophanes. But they usually update it, because if he just threw out all the names of the people from Periclean Athens, it wouldn't be funny anymore. But The Clouds is not like that. The Clouds is the story of a man named Strepsiades, and his son has spent too much money. He lives high, and he likes to race horses, and I think there's a little bit of gambling going on, and also he purchases horses to sponsor for races. And he has basically bankrupted his dad, and he owes people a lot of money. And his dad says, well, what we need is we need you to go to the Sophists. Now, the Sophists were people in Athens. You have to write this down, but remember that Sophia means wisdom in Greek, okay? So a philosopher is someone who loves wisdom. The Sophists, however, were the people who proclaim themselves to be wise. All right? I don't proclaim I love wisdom, I'm wise. I'm a sophist. And I'm really, really smart and good at what I do. And if you pay me enough, I will teach you to do it too. And so they went around Athens, and because our ideas are communicated in words, generally, right? They taught people to speak well. So they were more of a rhetoric school, a debate club, than they were seeking the deep truths of life. It took money for it. And people paid them big bucks to have their kids trained to speak well. You know, in Athens, everybody did their own speaking. You didn't hire a lawyer if you went to court. You'll notice in the Apology, Socrates doesn't have his lawyer come up and defend him. Socrates speaks. His accusers have gotten up before him and spoken. If you go to the assembly, where everybody casts their votes, you get up and you say your piece. So you needed to be able to speak well. But the Sophists gained a seedy underbelly reputation of being able to teach you to use words to make bad things seem good, to make the wrong seem right, and to get you out of trouble. So Strepsiades says, son, I'm going to send you to the Sophists, and they're going to teach you to be such a smooth talker that's going to get us out of debt. You're going to go wrangle with words and convince them that you don't really owe them the money. And we're good. So I'm going to send you to the Thinkery. The Thinkery, the foremost school in Athens. Now, the person running Aristophanes' Thinkery is Socrates. Socrates is not a sophist. Socrates made it very clear in his Apology, I don't take money for what I do. I don't take students. It's not my fault if people want to follow me around and listen to me talk. But I have no formal school and I have no formal students. But Aristophanes is just playing around. Aristophanes knew Socrates. Aristophanes, in fact, appears, do you remember I told you there's a dialogue by Plato about a drinking party called the Symposium, and Alcibiades comes in drunk at the end? And Aristophanes is one of the people at the party. He gives a speech on love too. So Aristophanes knew he was poking fun at him. But it's hard to say. It's 2,500 years ago. We don't know. Was he trying to stick it to Socrates, or was he just having fun? I don't know. We don't know. But Strepsiades shows up at the Thinkery, and he sees Socrates swinging in the air from a basket. I always picture a hot air balloon or something, but you know, they had the crane for the gods that would come in and out, and so Socrates is up there. And in the play, I'm on the second page, page 96, kind of halfway down, or towards the bottom. Strepsiades says, Socrates, my little Socrates! Mortal, what do you want with me? First, what are you doing up there? Tell me, I beseech you. I am traversing the air and contemplating the sun. And then Strepsiades says, listen to this. Thus it's not on the solid ground, but from the height of this basket that you slight the gods, if indeed, and it trails off. In other words, oh, I've heard you diss the gods and you don't believe in the gods. Well, I guess you do that from a basket if that's really what you do. And he slips in this rumor. Socrates says, I have to suspend my brain and mingle the subtle essence of my mind with this air, which is of flow-like nature, in order clearly to penetrate the things of heaven. I should have discovered nothing had I remained on the ground to consider from below the things that are above. For the earth by its force attracts the sap of the mind to itself. It's just the same with watercress. And so Strepsiades turns out to be pretty much unteachable, because the people at the Thinkery are telling him such a bunch of rot. So those of you who read Gulliver's Travels with me last year, this is like the place where they're extracting the sunbeams from the cucumbers and, you know, the Laputa. Except it wasn't on Laputa. That was the floating island, but one of the lower ones, where he goes to the scientific experiments. The ones where they're going to undo poop, you know, and turn it back into its constituent elements. Do you remember this? Like, you don't even remember the poop? That would... Oh, didn't you, but weren't you... You were in the high school class last year. Oh, shoot! Because some of you had already read it, my other kids read Gulliver's Travels.
I was in a play once called Gulliver's Travels.
Awesome. I bet they left the poop out of that one.
So,
Yeah.
wasn't that on the floating islands? Or was that just on?
No, on the floating island they were useless, but they went back down. Yeah, and anyway, I'm sorry I brought that up. I was thinking you guys read that with me last year. Anyway, this is the sort of thing going on in the thinkery, like ridiculous stuff. So Strepsiades sends his son. Well, you know, okay, I'm apparently not teachable, but I'm going to convince my son to go. And his son goes, and he's so thoroughly trained in how to make bad things seem good that he comes home and he starts beating his own father. He beats, oh no. And then he proves to him why this is just, why this is right, that it's normal and right that, what was, oh no. Oh yes. Okay, well, you know what, it is just water. It's just water, but yeah. It doesn't seem to be soaking in a lot. All right, I'm gonna not put that there anymore. Wow. You know what, in my earlier class, I couldn't find the Philippines on a map. Now everybody's gonna think I'm an idiot when they watch this. She can't find the Philippines and she spills things. Okay, I'm gonna keep talking while they're gone though. So this is the image that shows up in this play, that Socrates is one of these sophists. However, I'll look this up, but I don't want to read it until they come back. Socrates, in his Apology, apparently he was not getting napkins. Who is it that went? Alex. Sorry. It's like live television. You never know what's going to happen. Sometimes random people leave messages on the YouTube, like people I don't know. And somebody once said, you should edit your videos. Like, yeah, buddy, I'm not editing my videos. Not going to happen. Thank you, sir. It's not even, you know, it's just a little. Here. Yeah, here. Just give me the whole shebang, and I'm just going to stomp on him. Okay. All right. So in the Apology, if I clean up my mess, he says, he's talking about the people who are accusing him, and he says, what is most absurd in all this is that one cannot even know or mention their names unless one of them is a writer of comedies. That would be Aristophanes. And on the next page, he says, it goes something like this. The accusation of the common people goes something like this. Socrates is guilty of wrongdoing in that he busies himself studying things in the sky and below the earth. He makes the worse into the stronger argument, and he teaches the same thing to others. You've seen this yourself in the comedy of Aristophanes. A Socrates swinging about there, saying he was walking on air and talking a lot of other nonsense about things of which I know nothing at all. All right, so he's referring to this play. He's referring to this excerpt.
So wait,
that's good enough.
The common people are angry at him for thinking about things that they don't think about?
No. The common people are angry with him for making them look stupid. And actually, it's not the common people that are angry with him at all. Miletus and Anytus, who have brought charges against Socrates, are not. They're educated people who have been made to look foolish. We'll talk about that in a minute. But what I wanted to bring up is these guys existed in the time of Socrates. They were giving philosophy a bad name because they were only interested in making a buck. And they were the equivalent to the most shady lawyer you can imagine, okay? That's the same vibe. The guy who can go and get anybody off of any charge, you know, and find loopholes. This is the sort that we're talking about. Socrates wasn't one of them. Socrates hated them. He said it was like prostitution to sell knowledge for money. Knowledge is free and available. You don't sell it. Yes?
The sophists kind of remind me of Pharisees. were so, who like wanted a lot of money and were concerned about what they looked like on the outside. They didn't bother thinking about what they were teaching or their heart.
That's a good observation. Yeah.
Kind of build off that, because the problem with the Pharisees is that they were so concerned about the law and just like following like the word of the law, they didn't really get what's behind it. So then, so then when Jesus was, healing people on the Sabbath, they didn't get
Put
it.
him to death.
Say it's like you can't do that. It's like, well, was the Sabbath for man or for Sabbath? And so they're so focused on the exact rules, and I think Socrates kind of the same thing happened. We take like the rules of rhetoric and a lot of it in terms of philosophy, and it became just that.
Yes, and it became just that. Exactly, yes.
So I argue if knowledge is supposed to be free, then why isn't it free? Like, Socrates didn't do it, and he, of course, was portrayed as walking around with rags, not really caring about money, because he didn't want to end up with someone like Almighty who, was free and, able for loving money. But if knowledge is to be free, then how do you turn it into a giving or not? Why is it not free to college?
Okay, well, you guys respond,
I was
and then
about to say,
this is good.
What do you mean by knowledge is not free? What do you mean?
Socrates believes that knowledge is free, that there shouldn't be like some exit of an amount of money that to spend to gain knowledge. That everyone fluctuating on different monetary backgrounds should have the same amount of knowledge or be able to have the same amount of knowledge.
You guys are doing economics right now, right?
Yeah.
Supply and demand. If somebody knows something,
Yeah.
and somebody wants to know it,
But
I can sell it if I want to.
well, but
Depends
that's
on whether he wants to pay for it.
that's prostitution too. If somebody wants it and I've got it, I can sell it. We don't always say that you can do that.
So Mrs. Gammon, who does receive money for teaching Latin, is that wrong?
No, it's not necessarily wrong.
How is it different than
I would say that Socratism, we can call it Socratism, is the knowing knowledge and being able to apply the knowledge and have wisdom, but not being wise enough and really doing it for money.
I think we've been confusing knowledge with wisdom.
Well, one thing, my understanding of it is that
No.
Just a second. You're next. Matthew gets to speak after Kyle.
of it is basically, if someone asks a question that you know, and you're not teaching them for long periods of time, and you don't give the answer like, oh, they gave this answer. That is different from being a teacher and teaching someone to learn it over long periods of time. Then someone just asks, how much does it serve your purpose?
Yeah.
And you
What
know
time
that.
is it? Give me a buck. I'll tell ya.
If you need to give me that, I'll tell you. Like that's
Okay.
different from like being a teacher and doing that. So
Okay. Well, Matthew gets to go. Matthew's
That's
waited a
what
long time.
I was thinking is there's the difference between knowledge and teaching. You could say that they're not paying you for the knowledge, they're paying you to teach the knowledge and help you understand and comprehend the knowledge for a teacher.
rather than just paying for information.
Yeah.
That's very good.
He
Didn't pay to teach his disciples.
Well, yeah, because he was.
Of course, he's God, but Jesus
That's a bad example, Ethan.
the disciples didn't pay anything. Yes, the disciples had to pay with their lives, but not with money.
God had the world at his disposal.
God is telling knowledge, and He is telling the knowledge. And they can ask questions.
That's not the
Let it go. Let it go.
And so, Jesus is not,
let's, can I break in, Kyle? I'm sorry, I think I get your idea. Let me spin it for you a little bit. It has not, now, we have had schools, and people send their kids to school for as long as we've had civilizations. Okay, the Romans had schools, the Greeks had schools. But most people did not have access to them. Most people learned at home like you guys are learning, all right? So in one sense, you know, who are your real teachers? Your teachers are your parents. They're not getting paid. They're communicating wisdom, knowledge to you in a Socratian way. Socratic. That's it. But it also depends on what is knowledge, and you know, we got into what is brave and what is wise last week, and you know, what is knowledge and what is wisdom. I'm reading a really interesting book. I'm reading a confluence of several books, and they're all telling me about the same thing, and it's called Moral Imagination, and it's a study of back to Aristotle and Aquinas, and how since Descartes, those of you who were with me last year, you know, since Descartes, we have this idea that knowledge, that learning, that training, whatever it is, comes only through the rational, you know, steps, that we disconnect from everything, and then we go down to our first principles, and then we reason from them. Just like Descartes said, nothing exists except me, but I am thinking, so I must exist. We read that last year. But that there's another way to learn, and that there are things that we intuit. That the Greeks had two things. They had the ratio, the reason, and the intellectus. That's the part that where you just know things. This comes the first principles in geometry, or the first principles in logic. A thing cannot be and not be in the same way at the same time. Now, I don't have to teach you this. Like, you know it. I can't say this is and this is not. The law of non-contradiction. We know it, and we like, if you think about what you do when you roll the dice. Little kids, do you ever play a dice game and they have to count the dots, and it's just like, oh, and you know, especially if it's two dice. Oh my gosh, 1, 2, and you let them do it because they're learning to count. But I can look at a 5 and 4 and tell you I rolled a 9, and I just know. Partly it's experience, and I've extrapolated all the times I've rolled it. I know it. I don't have to reason through it anymore. I know it. And Descartes and modern world, we don't just know anymore. And so what people are selling, I think, is that reasoning ability that, you know, now we have to learn the rules of logic, and I'm not saying that's not a good thing. But there were ways to find knowledge that was true knowledge, that didn't involve reasoning. We knew things. And it's sort of like, I don't know, it's going to sound goofy when I say it, but when you, so once upon a time I was really depressed, and I went to a sermon, and he was talking about butterflies. That's all I remember, he's talking about butterflies, the sermon. And I went for a walk the next day, and I went around this corner, and there's always a water that stood there. And I came around the corner, and there must have been 50 butterflies that just floated around me. And I knew that was a message for me. Like, I can't tell you reasonably that that was a message for me. You know, I can't convince you using logic or rational. But I just heard this, and I was upset, and boom, and they're flying all around me. It only happened that once. And I knew. You know, sometimes we have those moments that we know. I'm sorry, this is kind of a tangent. But it depends. It depends. And so Socrates, I think, would have said those things that we just know in our guts. And it doesn't mean we're having a fantasy or hallucination. But it means there's two paths. And the path that we reason, this is the sophist path. Because not everybody, you got to be trained to do that, right? You got to take logic to know and apply the rules of logic. But there are some rules in the logic world that we just know in our guts. We just know. And the Greeks would say that's not, women's intuition or an old wives' tale or something. It is true knowledge but is true knowledge that comes to us from another avenue that today we just kind of block off and we say, yeah, let's reason that away. We'll explain that away. Does that make sense? And I think maybe these guys were the early, I'm being very anachronistic now, the Descartesians, like, we're going to teach you the road to truth and you follow these steps. And Socrates is like, no, open your mind and your heart, open the fullness of your mind. And this is not a quantifiable commodity that I can charge you for.
And this is completely right, but modernly, we're more logical in our thinking rather than emotional and outward and searching for, like, reasoning. Reasoning and knowledge are two different things.
Yes. Yes.
Reasoning is to bounce off of knowledge and to find a different path to
Yes.
a side of a different point.
Yes.
That's
Thank you. You guys never fail to. And I made a decision. Like, I was really unhappy last week because I just rushed through those questions, and then we had this awesome discussion about bravery and wisdom, and it was like 5 minutes. Like, to heck with that. So here's new rules. New rules in Mrs. Ferguson's class. Maybe we'll get to all the questions, and maybe we won't. Deal with it. You know what I mean? If you want to know the answer to the question and we didn't get to it, ask me. All right, and I will tell you, well, it's on this page and whatever. But we can't live that way anymore. Yes, okay. But we are actually gonna do something in Plato, and it is Euthyphro. So Euthyphro, by golly, I'm being paid for this and you guys are gonna learn. No. Okay, whether you want to or not. Okay, don't beat your parents when you get home. Euthyphro, what is Socrates doing at court this morning?
I wouldn't even be able to tell my mom. There's a reason. She's going to be like, no, I'm your mother, you stop.
Yeah, that's good enough for me. I'm your mother.
Was Socrates there to, like, as, like, kind of like a jury-ish to, like, defend against so-and-so killing someone?
No. Socrates says, so he meets his friend Euthyphro, all right? And he says, basically, what are you doing here, Socrates, to make you leave your usual haunts in the Lyceum and spend your time here? And Euthyphro says, someone has indicted you? Quite so. Who is he? I do not really know him myself, Euthyphro. He is apparently young and unknown. They call him Miletus, I believe. So Socrates is there because he is on charges. He is being charged with a crime. The crime that we unfold in the Apology. So he's on his way to court because he has to appear in court because he's been charged with something. Then he says, and why are you here, Euthyphro? And why is Euthyphro there?
Because he's bringing charges against his dad.
He's bringing charges against his dad in court. They had 2 slaves, and what happened? Why is this? My microphone's upside down. I'm just a mess. Nobody who watches this will ever sign their kids up for my classes. She doesn't know where the Philippines are, and then she spills her water. I feel scattered today. Euthyphro and his family had 2 slaves, and one of them killed the other one. And the one who was the murderer, the dad tossed him in a pit or put him in a room or something to decide what to do with him. And basically it took too long, he didn't get back to him, and the guy died. I don't know whether he starved to death, because that would imply a long time, or maybe he had injuries from the, whatever, the fracas that got the other guy killed. And so he's decided to press charges against his dad for murdering the murdering slave. Oh, I know. That's what Socrates is thinking. Dang. That's what he says. So most of us, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you heard it right.
Would it be murder because last year didn't we say that murder was the
Intentional killing of a human being. Yes, Ethan.
It was the negligence.
Okay.
Negligence. That's why child endangerment is considered such a really like a felony. That's why.
We talk about anything in here. It's lovely.
Negligence. That,
We need all day, though.
Even if they're guilty of something, it doesn't mean that they should like die because of your own like idiocy and not like
So in most cases, I think we would call at worst manslaughter, maybe what he was guilty of. There were extenuating circumstances, obviously. All right. I'm sorry I interrupted you, Ethan.
one more little thing.
Yeah.
He might have died of infection, of injury.
Yes.
The pain of infection, that is worse than dying in your throat.
How do you know that?
Ethan knows lots. Okay, I feel like at this point I am going to rein the conversation in, however. I feel like maybe I should set some parameters. Okay, so Naya's like, yes, please. So Socrates responds this way. Wow, Euthyphro, you must know a lot about justice and piety, because that's pretty bold. That's pretty bold to bring charges against your dad. And he's like, you bet I do. Doggone straight.
Yeah, that's.
And it's like, Euthyphro, maybe you could teach me. Because you know what? I got to go in there and I got to defend myself. They say I'm corrupting the youth of Athens. They say I don't believe in the gods. Maybe you could teach me what true piety, true holiness is. And then I can say to them, you know what? I may have been mistaken in the past, but I'm a student of Euthyphro's now. He's teaching me all about piety, and he really does know. It's like, yeah, I know. So he says, well, great, Euthyphro. What is it? What is piety? And what's the first answer that Euthyphro gives? Yeah. You go ahead.
That which the gods love.
Okay, that's not the first answer he gives. That's okay. That is one of the answers he gives. Yeah, Matthew, what's the very first one?
Against the person committing the criminal act.
Okay. He says, I say that the pious is to do what I am doing now. Prosecute the wrongdoer, be it about murder or temple robbery or anything else, whether the wrongdoer is your father or your mother or anyone else, and not to prosecute is impious. So basically he said, what is piety? It's what I'm doing right now. And what problem does Socrates have with this answer? Yeah, Matthew.
It's just an example of piety, not a definition.
Okay. It's like, no, you don't understand, Euthyphro. I didn't ask you for an example of piety. I want to know what it is. Here, let me see exactly how he phrases it. Bear in mind that I did not bid you to tell me one or two of the many pious actions, but that form itself that makes all pious actions pious. What is it that every case of piety has in common? So this is a lovely time to talk about Plato's forms. All right, so Plato had, thank you, Plato had a concept that all the things that we see here in front of us, not that they're not real exactly, but that they aren't important. What is important is a form, an example that exists on another plane. We can't see it, it's invisible. And its presence in individual things is what makes that thing that thing. For example, look at your chairs. All right, now look at this chair. Now picture a folding chair. Now picture a lazy boy recliner. Now picture, I don't know, that's enough chairs. Now, whatever chair you have around your kitchen table. Okay? Are they all recognizable to you as chairs? If you had never seen chairs before and all those things were in a room together, would you recognize them as having a similarity? All right? You would. And Plato said, here's why. Because in another realm, there is an idea of chairness. The idea of chair, the form of chair. For Plato and Aristotle, the form is what makes something what it is. For example, Plato, it's nothing, right? It's a substance. It's Plato, but you can make it into all sorts of things. I roll it and I make it into a ball, and then yeah, Play-Doh.
talking about Plato?
You can take Plato and just punch him up and
I should have used silly putty. Okay, so, or we can do this and we make a snake. Okay, we've given it form, all right? And Play-Doh is very flexible in that we can change its form easily, and it will, all right? So, like that things have a form. This form is imposed on matter, whatever metal and cloth and stuff that chair's made of. They've imposed a form on it, and that form is chairness. And because we could rip that apart and recycle the pieces and make them into something else, give them a different form, right? It's a chair. And so this is the Platonic, not Platonic, Platonic, the Platonic realm. This realm where everything is what it is because it is given a form from a place where these forms actually literally exist, all right? When we get to Aristotle, which I don't know, you guys, I don't know what I'm going to do with you guys at the end of the year, but what?
What about replay? It's like soft and stuff, and you put it in
wait, who's black?
Oh, but, well, presumably we could subject it to high temperatures or whatever, and we could soften it again. Anyway, so this is what Socrates is asking Euthyphro for. I want to know the form of the pious, something that's present in all these acts that makes them all pious, all right? Because examples, it's like asking a kid, what is the definition of a dog? You can't say poodle, black lab, that's not a definition of a dog. Those are examples of dogs. And Euthyphro has given examples. Yes?
It seems like the definition of piety to the ancient Greeks were respect to the gods and respect to the things that the gods respect.
We're getting there. All right, so I just want to throw in one thing that happened in this conversation about his examples. He says, Zeus attacked his father. Cronus was eating all those children, if you recall. And Zeus, I know, they eat the children. And Zeus got hidden away, and he went and he castrated his father, and it's ugly. That's like this is not the PG-13 version anymore. Yes, they keep doing that to their dads. Like, stop already. And so, yes, and I think that's, anyway, never mind. It gets gruesome and worse. He's like, so Zeus did it. Zeus came after his own dad. Why does everybody think I'm so bad for coming after my own dad? And Socrates says, are we to say, wait a minute, wait a second. All right. Are we to say, we who agree that we ourselves, I'm going to read that sentence. Tell me, by the God of friendship, do you really believe these things are true? And do you really believe there is war among the gods, and terrible enmities and battles, and other such things as are told by the poets, and other sacred stories such as are embroidered by the good writers, and by representations of which the robe of the goddess is adorned when it is carried up to the Acropolis? Are we to say these things are true, Euthyphro? Not only these, Socrates, but as I was saying just now, I will, if you wish, relate many other things about the gods, which I know will amaze you. Socrates, I should not be surprised, but you will tell me these at leisure some other time. Let's not go there now. He makes Euthyphro admit, oh yeah, all those stories of Homer, they're true. Oh yeah, Zeus totally went after his dad. And the whole Trojan War mess with the goddesses fighting, oh yeah, I believe the gods are like that. The gods did that. And you can hear,
They kill each other.
yeah, we're just acting like the gods. So notice what Plato has inserted here a hint. Socrates does not believe these things are true. Remember, he's going to be tried for not believing in the gods, is one of the charges, okay? He didn't say he doesn't believe in the gods, but he said, yeah, would gods really do that? Is that, the gods aren't, I don't think, yes. So what is his second? So Euthyphro, he doesn't like the first. What's the second Lay it on us, Carson.
Piety is
That which the gods love. He says, what is dear to the gods is pious, and what is not is impious. Socrates says, splendid, Euthyphro. You have answered just the way I wanted. Whether your answer is true, I do not know yet, but you will obviously show me that what you say is true. He says, certainly. And Socrates, well, let's examine it. He was very confident. And Socrates says, an action or a man dear to the gods is pious, but an action or a man hated by the gods is impious. They're not the same, but quite opposite, the pious and the impious. Is that not so? It is indeed. That seems a good statement? I think so, Socrates. We have also stated that the gods are in a state of discord, and that they are at odds with each other, Euthyphro, and that they are at enmity with each other. Has that too been said? Do you see the next step? Well, or if piety is what the gods love, but the gods don't agree with each other, then some of them might love something and others of them don't love it. Some of them loved Troy. Some of them hated Troy. We have a serious problem when we have multiple gods, don't we? Because if they don't all agree, don't be polytheistic. We've solved it. So he says, according to your argument, different gods consider different things to be just, beautiful, ugly, good, and bad. For they would not be at odds with one another unless they differed about these subjects, would they? Oh, Euthyphro, you are right. And Euthyphro, I can just see his eyes darting around. Oh, Socrates, he did it again. Yes, he also says, just a second, let me see. I don't want to spring it on to, okay, no, it's on the next page. He says, tell me that I may become wiser. What proof you have that all the gods consider that man to have been killed unjustly? So if piety, because they tweak it. Well, I'm going to change my definition to say, pious is what all the gods love. And impiety is what all the gods hate. And then the other things are, optional maybe. So Socrates said, okay, good. Now, can you please explain to me that all the gods believe that this guy was murdered by your father, that this slave was murdered by your father?
Then you wouldn't even need a human court. All you would need is a book of law.
Yes. Euthyphro says, this is perhaps no light task, Socrates, though I could show you quite clearly. It's like, it's not going to be easy, but I could if I wanted to. And he says, well, maybe you think I'm stupider than the jury that you're going in there, because apparently you're going to explain it to them. He said, oh yeah, I'm going to explain it to them. They're going to agree with me. And so Socrates says, okay, well, I know we have places to go and people to see. So, but that's not really, this is a tangent we've gotten off on, whether all the gods believe that your dad actually killed this guy. We still don't have a definition. We still don't have a good definition of the pious. And he said, we've said that what they all love is pious, and what they all dislike is impious, but I'm not sure we've tested this definition very well. Because here's what I want to know from you, Euthyphro. I want to know, is it pious because the gods love it, or do they love it because it's already pious? Here's what I want to ask you, Euthyphro. Which came first? Do the gods, whatever the gods love, that's pious? And at first he's like, yeah, I like that. Well, what if the gods change their minds? These gods do seem like the type that would change their minds. What if yesterday it was pious, but the gods have changed their minds and now today it's not pious? Do you see how having an unchanging God is a great benefit in this respect? The Greeks had no such benefit, did they? Things might change. So, you might call it pious today, but not pious tomorrow. We have to keep a scorecard on what the gods are loving currently. On the other hand, maybe this is already pious. This is piety. And now the gods see it and they're like, oh, I love it. It's pious. Then who decided it was pious? If it was already pious because the gods love it, some weird realm above the gods. And now we're going to have to appeal to something higher than these gods, because apparently there was some entity deciding what is pious, and then the gods saw it and they said, oh, I love it. It's a huge gap, and it is a problem. And Euthyphro has no answer for this.
And most of this is like that, where you look at it like, why is this good? Because God says so.
Mm-hmm.
Why did God change it? Or
Yes. And it's not an easy, like, we're just sort of facilely saying, yes, but we're Christians and we have all the answers. But we don't. Because, what does it mean that something is good, that God is the good, that it is coexistent with God? And this is a deep theological issue that we don't have time or the capacity, probably, any of us in this class, for digging as deeply as we could. But it's an issue in just thinking about the divine. But we are one up on them, right? Because we have a God who doesn't ever will or do bad. And some people will try to test theologians. Well, what if he did? What if he did? Yeah, but he can't. He can't. And so, well, what if God were opposite than what he is, and murder was good, and peace was bad? Well, then he wouldn't. Yeah. Exactly. So, but these are. We need to always remember that these arguments, and not arguments in the sense of having a fight, but you know what I mean, debates, are legitimate. Like, we need to hear, because we're surrounded again by a largely non-Christian culture, right? And when we just give our answers like Euthyphro, when we become Euthyphro, oh yeah, I can explain that. Yeah, I know. I think it's better off when we say, yeah, that's a deep mystery. I don't know, but what I do know is that God is good and he doesn't will the bad. That's a hard sell when you look at the way the world is. You know what I mean? We take it seriously. Do you know what I mean? Take the non-Christian view seriously. But anyway, so Euthyphro's been shot down again. And I want to see what. Okay, so finally, Euthyphro says that I think piety is a subset of justice.
So now
Justice is the overarching virtue, and I think that piety is the area of justice that takes care of the gods, and that the rest of justice is the part that takes care of our relationships with human beings. So piety is justice towards the gods, and the rest of justice is justice towards human beings. Yes?
Then since justice is the big, like, it is the God, and piety is the part pertaining to the gods, and then our justice is the justice pertaining to humanity. We are equal to the gods in the face of...
In a sense, yes.
In the face of justice, the Greek God, by how Euthyphro is trying to say this.
And we do get that impression from like the Homeric stories and things like that, that justice to the gods and between the gods and justice to humanity are all part and parcel of one thing. But Socrates isn't going to let this rest either. Did you notice Socrates doesn't let things rest? Can you notice why maybe he ticks some people off? So Socrates says, now, because Euthyphro said it's care of the gods. Piety is care of the gods. He says, well, now, care in each case has the same effect. It aims at the good and the benefit of the object cared for. Like horse breeders care for horses, they make them better. Dog breeders care for dogs, they make them better. So he said, is piety then, which is the care of the gods, also to benefit the gods and make them better? By Zeus, no. Euthyphro said, no, we're not making gods better. And he says, I didn't think you meant that, but I don't believe you mean this kind of care. What kind of care do you mean? Euthyphro says, the kind of care, Socrates, that slaves take of their masters. Like we're the slaves of the gods. Our slaves take care of us. They bring us food and wash our clothes and everything, and we take care of the gods. All right, Socrates says, I understand. It is likely to be a kind of service of the gods. Quite so. He says, can you tell me the achievement of what goal the service tends? He says, what is the goal of service to doctors? Isn't it achieving health? Yes. What about service to shipbuilders? It's to build ships, right? Yes. He says, well, then what is that excellent aim that the gods achieve? Using us as their servants. Many fine things, Socrates. So did generals, my friend. Nevertheless, you could easily tell me their main concern, which is to achieve victory in war. Is it not? Of course. And farmers produce many fine things. But the job is to grow food, right? He says, well, so what fine things do the gods achieve? By our service. And he says, I told you a short while ago, Socrates, that it is a considerable task to acquire any precise knowledge of these things. But to put it simply, I say that if a man knows how to say and do what is pleasing to the gods at prayer and sacrifice, those are pious actions, such as preserve both private houses and public affairs of state. The opposite of these pleasing actions are impious and overturn and destroy everything. This is not really an answer. That's no answer. And Socrates knows it, and he says, yeah, you must think I'm very stupid because you just aren't, you could explain this to me if you wanted to, but you're not explaining it to me. And he says, once more then, what do you say that piety and the pious are? Are they a knowledge of how to sacrifice and pray? They are. All right. So he says it would follow from this statement that piety would be a knowledge of how to give to and beg from the gods. Sacrifice and prayer. You understand what I said very well, Socrates. All right.
He just changed his
Yeah. And so Socrates said, okay, so to beg correctly would be to ask from them the things that we need, and to give correctly would be to give them what they need from us. Yes. So piety would then be a sort of trading skill between gods and men. Trading, yes, if you prefer to call it that. Socrates says, I prefer nothing unless it is true. But tell me, what benefit do the gods derive from the gifts they receive from us? What do they get from it? And he says, what else? Then honor, reverence, and what I mentioned just now, to please them. The pious is then, Euthyphro, pleasing to the gods, but not beneficial or dear to them? I think it is of all things most dear to them. So the pious is once again what is dear to the gods. Because all these things, the sacrifices and the honor, why do they like it? Because it is dear to them. Oh, so the pious is what the gods love. But, yeah, we just didn't agree with that 10 minutes ago. At this point, Socrates says, so we must investigate again from the beginning what piety is, as I shall not willingly give up before I learn this. Do not think me unworthy, but concentrate your attention and tell the truth. For you know it, if any man does, and I must not let you go like Proteus before you tell me. Here's Euthyphro's answer. Some other time, Socrates, I'm in a hurry now. It's time to go. And he leaves. And we're just left. We don't know what piety is at the end of this dialogue. We don't know. Now, what in the world could induce Socrates to spend his life like this? Euthyphro is one of the earliest, as far as we can tell. You know, Plato scholars divide them into early, middle, and late dialogues. This is one of the earliest ones. He just kind of mentions that form of piety sort of as a sideline. The forms become more important later. His very last dialogue doesn't even have Socrates in it. The last one he wrote before he does called the Laws. Plato grew, and expanded his own ideas. So this is just a taste, but this is a representative taste. We leave and we don't know. We don't know what piety is.
So it's the dialogue of Euthyphro. Is that one of his earliest going around with?
Yes.
But that was before his own. That
Yes.
was right before
I
his
meant. Let me rephrase. One of the earliest that Plato wrote. Plato wrote these. Most of them after Socrates was already dead.
Okay.
They are not transcribed conversations that he followed around and then published. These are Plato's inventions. But as far as we know, they are representative of what Socrates did. Thank you for that distinction. Yes.
And I argue that Socrates would spend his life about of course, he doesn't do it, but he would do that and answer questions. Like, because what is wisdom? What is piety? You can't answer these things without interacting. And the unfortunate thing about Socrates is that he's so close. He's so close to finding what wisdom and what piety and all these things really are. He's so close. Piety. So what is piety? What is the generally accepted definition of piety?
I can try to find a definition for
And if we find that definition, you can link it to
Oh yeah, this is really good. Yes, I would like you to do that. I would like to find like Webster's or somebody smart's definition. Okay.
reverence for God.
The quality of being
Here,
religious or reverent.
Okay,
That's
Kyle.
not helpful.
Here, Kyle.
Reverence for
Yeah.
God or devout fulfillment of religious obligations. So it's not just religious obligations, like that's a part of piety, but it's also what we do as a Christian because we love God.
But you know what? Isn't that our obligation? Paul said, I am not my own. I was bought with a price. I am a slave of Christ. None of my time is my own. None of my money is my own. My very body is not my own. And so one would say then that my obligation to my Lord is he gets everything. Now, I realize I also have to sleep and eat, and he knows that too. Do you know what I mean? But it's not, if you think about it, it's not a tallying up of have I done my reverent actions. The life of Christianity, that's what makes it so different from every other religion, right? Euthyphro can say, well, I went and I sacrificed and I did this and I said the right prayers. Christians say, when I do all that, I have only, the parable, I have only done what the poor servant would do. I've only done what anyone would do. I owe my whole, I wouldn't exist without him. And in fact, I would not exist 5 seconds from now without him. In him we live and move and have our being. He's everything. And so this is, I think, we have different faith traditions in this classroom probably. The Protestant versus Catholic or Orthodox, the faith versus works or whatever. But if you think about it, we're all saying the same thing. It's two sides of the same coin. Whether you say, well, if you love him, you'll do the works, or whether I say, I'm going to do the works no matter how I feel today because I owe him my very life and existence. We're all agreeing that with James that faith without works is dead. Do you know what I mean? I'm sorry, that was a long tangent. Kyle, what did you want to say?
Similarly, piety is devotion. Having devotion to God is very similar to piety. The quality of being religious or reverent to God.
So this is, Matthew, you say it, and then I'm going to wrap up.
The problem is back then, not only had to define it, they kind of had to show why it was good, because piety is good. Well, prove why piety is good. Well, that's just a definition. We live in a secular society where we just kind of take religion and put it on the side. Just say, well, piety is just an action, but it's not necessarily good. So you really don't have to prove why good is for our definition.
And so, and I want to go along with what Ethan was saying about Socrates being so close. You know, because if you think about it, and we talked about this a little bit last week, you know, so I don't really literally believe there are forms. Although some Christian Platonists say, yes, there are forms, they're all in the mind of God. Everything, the chairness and the dogness and the everything, that it's in the mind of God. And that's where Plato's forms are found. But now I've lost my train of thought. I was going to start something. Oh, I hate it when that happens.
It
Yeah.
was about how Christian
Yeah, and that was before that. That was my little aside. And I said to Ethan, going back to what you said about Socrates was so close. Maybe this isn't quite it, but I think that the gist of where my brain was going was that the dichotomy, the difference between the Greek gods who aren't good, who aren't trustworthy. What was I going to say? That if you think about, we touched on this with wisdom last week, if being wise or being pious, these are all part of living in reality. And God is the ultimate reality. Reality is more than what we see. Reality is more than what we hear. It's more than that. There are angels, very possibly, in this room right now. I believe it. And I'm pretty sure all of you believe it. There may be demons in this room right now. I believe it. I literally believe it. I can't see it. But it's reality. You see? So there's a reality, and so putting yourself in tune with that reality. So for us, piety, I suppose, is living in that reality before we get there, before it's really real. But because it is really real. So I don't want to say that. Do you know what I mean? Before it's visibly real.
Our reality is material, and God's reality is beyond materialism, is beyond our
Yes.
materialism.
But it is nonetheless real. And so I would argue that all those things that we would call pious actions, so the Ten Commandments, I'm not telling you anything wrong. I'm not worried about what I'm about to tell you. I just don't want you to take it wrong. You can think of the Ten Commandments as rules that we should follow. And most of the world thinks of them that way. But what if they are the keys to living in the reality of the kingdom? For example, they're the way the kingdom works. And we can't live there. It's the difference between, you don't speed on the roads because you'll get arrested, okay, so we follow the rules, versus living in our culture. Like we're part of this culture, and so we do certain things. It's just part of us. It's soaked into us. And maybe not committing adultery and not committing murder and not lying and honoring your mother and your father. They're not just, okay, I did that. But they are how we change, and they make us able to live in the new reality. And the people who don't do those things can't live in the new reality. You know, I read this cool thing once. It was talking about the fact that not everybody saw Jesus after the resurrection. And some people who did see him didn't recognize him, you know. And it's like, well, but, you know, if he had just appeared to everybody, boom, here I am. But he didn't. He appeared, and what if he only appeared to the people who could see him? Do you see what I mean? What if he had appeared, but a bunch of them weren't even capable of seeing him? Because their hearts they weren't living in the kingdom. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just speculating, okay? Like, and this wasn't even my speculation. But it's cool, isn't it? But I think, so this is the closeness of Socrates. This is the closeness of Plato. It's like, I think there's a realm, and our training here is to train us to live in that realm. Unfortunately, he started thinking this realm was like a weight around your neck. Like the body and all this stuff, it was just a hindrance. whereas we know it's good because God created it, right? But so he started going this weird, I only want to live with the forms. Like, yeah, God gave us bodies. We live here. You know, this is life. But it's not the complete reality. And you know, we know that there are great saints, Christians of the past, who have been given, you know, great gifts of healing and insight and wisdom. Paul lists those, you know, the gifts, you know, of wisdom and healing and teaching and words of knowledge. And we have to be careful with those things. And he says, test the spirits, right? But there have been people who basically, we would say from our perspective, trained themselves to live in that reality better. But maybe from God's perspective, it's just like they lived in a way that was required to see these things. You know, it looks, from our perspective, it's a great gift of God. But maybe God's looking down and saying, oh, they're ready. They can handle it. I can show this to him. I can show this to her. Because she's living here already a little bit, you know? And I think that's the idea we get from Plato. Anyway, I'm so sorry. But I said, this is the new and improved Mrs. Ferguson class where we don't worry about all the questions. All right, but I am going to talk about before we went off on that, I said, why would Socrates spend his life doing this? And in the apology, I'm going to skip around in the apology. Yeah, oh, you do it. Say it.
Well, in it, he says he always had this inner voice inside of him, and that his rule is always whatever the inner voice tells him, he's going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
The inner voice is called conscience,
Mm-hmm.
spirit. And you know, that was valued truth is good in and of itself.
Yes, he said, I'm going to tweak what you said just a little bit. He said his voice it never told him what to do, it only told him not to do something. And so this is going to freak you out, all right, but you're all, like, you can handle it. So in Greek, there's a word daimon. And it honestly, we get the word demon from it, but they did not mean, they meant, you know, in my Greek book, it's God or tutelary spirit is the definition. It's your personal, like your guardian angel, sort of. All right, to Christianize it, it's not something, you know, like, don't go home and start exploring to see if you have a personal. Don't do that. Don't ever do that. But the Greeks, this was not a weird thing, but they really believed it in principle and not in fact. And Socrates said, I have a voice, I have a being, and it only tells me not when it doesn't want me to do something. But it doesn't tell me not to do it. And so one of the last questions I asked you, I know, was why, when he gets convicted and a death penalty is issued, why does he say, you know, why didn't his daimon warn him not to come? And his answer was, because maybe this isn't a bad thing. Maybe from your perspective, this looks really bad. But maybe from the perspective of ultimate reality, this is not a bad thing. He had another reason, though, and this is the famous story. He says, you know Chaerephon. He was my friend from youth, and the friend of most of you. He went to Delphi one time and ventured to ask the oracle. He asked if any man was wiser than I, and the Pythian replied that no one was wiser. Chaerephon is dead, but his brother will testify to this. Consider that I tell you this because I would inform you about the origin of the slander that he doesn't believe in the gods and he's corrupting the youth of the city. When I heard this reply, I asked myself, whatever does the god mean? What is his riddle? I am very conscious that I am not wise at all. What then does he mean by saying that I am the wisest? For surely he does not lie. It is not legitimate for him to do so. Notice his view of the gods. Gods wouldn't lie. Oh, Homeric gods would lie. They would so lie. His gods are loftier than that. For a long time I was at a loss as to his meaning. Then I very reluctantly turned to some such investigation as this. I went to one of those reputed wise, thinking that there, if anywhere, I could refute the oracle and say to it, this man is wiser than I, but you said I was. Then when I examined this man, there's no need for me to tell you his name, he was one of our public men, my experience was something like this. I thought that he appeared wise to many people, and especially to himself, but he was not. I then tried to show him that he thought himself wise, but that he was not. Do people appreciate this? Oh no. As a result, he came to dislike me, and so did many of the bystanders. So I withdrew and thought to myself, I am wiser than this man. It is likely that neither of us knows anything worthwhile, but he thinks he knows something, and he does not. Whereas when I do not know, neither do I think I know. So I am likely to be wiser than he to this small extent, that I do not think I know what I do not know. And Socrates goes on to say, now I have spent my life trying to find someone wiser than me. But every time I engage them in conversation, they turn out like Euthyphro. They don't really know. They just talk big. That's what I'm doing here, men of Athens. Now, Socrates really, you might have noticed in the Apology, the man does not do himself any favors with the crowd. In fact, he calls up Miletus and cross-examines him, engages him in Socratic dialogue on the stand. One of his accusers, all right? He says, come up here, Miletus. Tell me, surely you consider it of the greatest importance that our young men be as good as possible. He says, indeed I do. Well, tell me who improves them. You obviously know, in view of your concern. You say you have discovered the one man who corrupts them, namely me, and you bring me here and accuse me to these men. Come, inform these men and tell them who it is who improves them. You see, Miletus, that you are silent and know not what to say. Does this not seem shameful to you, and a sufficient proof of what I say, that you have not been concerned with any of this? You don't care about the young men of Athens. You just don't like me. Tell me, my good sir, who improves our young men? The laws. That is not what I am asking, but what person who has knowledge of the laws to begin with? These jurymen, Socrates. How do you mean, Miletus? Are these able to educate the young and improve them? Certainly. All of them, or some but not others? All of them. Very good, Bahira. You mention a great abundance of benefactors. But what about the audience? Do they improve the young or not? They do too. How about the members of the council? Counselors also. But Miletus, what about the assembly? Do the members of the assembly corrupt the young, or do they improve them? They improve them. All the Athenians, it seems, make the young into fine good men except me, and I alone corrupt them. Is that what you mean? That is most definitely what I mean. Wow. And so he says, oh, that's amazing. You know, tell me about horses. Does the whole world know how to take care of horses and just a couple of people bad for horses? Or is it the other way around? There are a few people who really, really know how to care for horses, and the vast majority of people don't know or don't care. Think of any other topic. Is there anything else in the world where one person in the world fouls it up and everyone else does a good job? Boy, Miletus, you're so smart that you found me out. Okay, this is not helping. Shaming your accusers in public again?
It's totally true, though.
Oh, yeah.
If any of the Greeks had just used their brains, they would have seen.
Well, but you know what? So we do things sometimes for other reasons than our brains, don't we? We have different motivations. If Herodotus and Thucydides tell us anything, sometimes we have pretty low-class motivations for stuff that we do. So he says, now look, this is why I'm unpopular with the people, right? This is Exhibit A. He said, I don't set myself up a school, but I can't help it if young people are out and they're in the agora and they're listening to the public business and they see me talking to someone and I'm just talking. I can't make them go away, so they want to listen in. And so it might happen that the person I'm talking to comes off, you know, like not knowing anything. That's not my fault. He said, you know what, if I'm corrupting the young men of Athens, well, they wouldn't be here to accuse me. Maybe they would, but where are their parents? Where are the parents of the people I'm corrupting? Shouldn't they be here? And he points out to people in the audience, Plato's brother is there. You know, points out, well, what about your dad? No, they're not accusing me. So they, he says, just a second, I got to find this one place. All right. If you kill me, you will not easily find another like me. I was attached to this city by the god, though it seems a ridiculous thing to say.
Did he just say God?
Yes, by the god. He often said the god. As upon a great and noble horse, which was somewhat sluggish because of its size and needed to be stirred up by a kind of gadfly. I am the biting fly of Athens, and I stir you up. Remember, by the way, this is happening, this isn't when it's written, but it's happening in the year 399. Peloponnesian War ended 5 years ago. Peloponnesian War ended 5 years ago. And we are cynical, and we are tired, and we are angry in Athens. And we are looking for people to blame. Picture it, picture it. And he said, I'm here to stir you up. You've been engaged in a 30-year war with that mess in Sicily, and then tyrants took over, and then you threw them out, and then the Spartans, when they won, they put a set of 30 tyrants in that ruled for a while, and there were proscription lists and murders, executions. It was awful. Then they threw them out. And you know, you go through stuff like that, and you get people that just don't care anymore. Maybe there is no good. Maybe there is no true. Much like people we live among today. And he says, I'm the fly that bites your rear end and makes you jump up and think. Pay attention to your lives. And he says, because it is the greatest good for a man to discuss virtue every day and those other things about which you hear me conversing and testing myself in others. For the unexamined life is not worth living for men. And is there a better definition of the people we live around today? Unexamined. Oh, I'm just going to go. I go to work, don't know why, just so I get a paycheck. Don't care what I do at work, really, not important. Just want to earn some money so I can get a pizza and some beers on a Friday night and go out with the guys and, get some streaming Netflix going. I'm not saying any of those things are evil. But for crying out loud, there's more to life than that. That's not even life. What? It's barely living. And Socrates says, men of Athens, you are barely living if you don't think why you do things. The jury went out, and they came back with a vote of guilty. And they said, okay, now you get to choose your punishment. It's very, very likely that if Socrates had said, I think, we'll all be happy if you just send me into exile, this would have been fine. But the accused gets to suggest what punishment is suitable. I asked you this one of the questions. What did Socrates suggest as a suitable punishment for himself? No? Matthew? It's hilarious. He did suggest a fine, but he suggested something else first. Do you want me to go ahead and read it? Or do you find it? Oh, maybe, okay, I'm sorry. Now I'm inventing new questions. See what happens when I turn myself loose from the questions? I just go crazy. He says, what do I deserve for being such a man? Some good, men of Athens, if I must truly make an assessment according to my deserts, and something suitable. What would be suitable for a poor benefactor who needs leisure to exhort you? Nothing is more suitable, gentlemen, than for such a man to be fed at the Prytaneum, the place where you feed people on the dime of Athens, the place where you feed Olympic victors as a reward. Free food for life. That's what I deserve. Oh, Socrates, you're not going to give you free food for life. Okay, a fine. Yeah, I got no money. And then some friends. Okay, they said 30 minas. I can do that. That's what we're going to say. But it ought to be free food for life. They go back to death penalty. He says, Either the dead are nothing, and have no perception of anything, or it is a change and a relocating to another place. If the dead know nothing, then nothing's going to hurt me after I die, and I'm released from a lot of trouble. If we relocate to another place, he says, I'm going to get to have a chat with Homer and Hesiod. That's not so bad. And he leaves them with this: a good man cannot be harmed in either life or death. Now the hour to part has come. I go to die, and you go to live. Which of us goes to the better lot is known to no one except the God. And he exits. Crito goes. Crito tries to convince him to run away. We can blow you out of here, Socrates. They didn't really imprison people. They didn't really imprison people in ancient Greece, except for short term. Imprisonment wasn't a punishment. It was just till they did whatever they were going to do with you. But they had to imprison Socrates for a few days because the ship to Delos, there was a holy ship that went to the island of Delos, yes, where the Delian League money used to be, where Apollo and Artemis were born, supposedly. And so they sent a ship out to Apollo, the god of that imaginative knowledge we were talking about, of song, of poetry, of the sun, of that sort of wisdom. And when the ship comes back, they're going to put to death the wisest man in Athens. And Crito says, we can bust you out of here. He says, you know what? Athens is my mother. If Athens has seen good to do this, who am I to say it's not good? I won't leave. And then in the Phaedo, I want to take a minute to read this. Oh, I'll keep you a few minutes over. Okay, remember our death of Socrates. Phaedo is all about his friends visiting him his last day of his life and saying, Socrates, please convince us that the soul is immortal. Please tell us why we shouldn't be upset and the soul is immortal. This is what the whole dialogue's about. After a time, came back the man who was to administer the poison, carrying it made ready in a cup. When Socrates saw him, he said, well, my good man, you're an expert in this. What must one do? Just drink it and walk around until your legs feel heavy, and then lie down and it will act of itself. And he offered the cup to Socrates, who took it quite cheerfully, without a tremor or a change of feature or color, but looking at the man from under his eyebrows, as was his wont, he asked, what do you say about pouring a libation from this drink? Is it allowed? We only mix as much as we believe will suffice, said the man. We can't pour out some to the gods. I understand, Socrates said, but one is allowed, indeed one must, utter a prayer to the gods that the journey from here to yonder may be fortunate. This is my prayer, and may it be so. And while he was saying this, he was holding the cup and then drained it calmly and easily. Most of us had been able to hold back our tears reasonably well up till then, but when we saw him drinking it, and after he drank it, and we could hold them back no longer, my own tears came in floods against my will. So I covered my face. I was weeping for myself, not for him, for my misfortune in being deprived of such a comrade. Even before me, Crito was unable to restrain his tears and got up. Apollodorus had not ceased from weeping before, and at this moment his noisy tears and anger made everybody present break down, except Socrates. What is this, he said, you strange fellows? It is mainly for this reason that I sent the women away, to avoid such unseemliness, for I am told one should die in good omened silence. So keep quiet and control yourselves. His words made us alarmed, and we checked our tears. He walked around, and when he said his legs were heavy, he lay on his back as he had been told to do. And the man who had given him the poison touched his body, and after a while tested his feet and legs, and pressed hard on his foot, and asked if he felt this. Socrates said no. Then he pressed his calves and made his way up his body and showed us that it was cold and stiff. He felt it himself and said that when the cold had reached his heart, he would be gone. As his belly was getting cold, Socrates uncovered his head. He covered it, and said, these were his last words, Crito, we owe a cock to Asclepius. Make this offering to him and do not forget. Shall be done, said Crito. Tell us if there's anything else. There's no answer. Shortly afterwards, Socrates made a movement. The man uncovered him, and his eyes were fixed. Seeing this, Crito closed his eyes and his mouth. Such was the end of our comrade, a man who, we would say, was of all those we have known the best, and also the wisest and the most upright. All right. First of all, Asclepius is the god of healing. He's the doctor god. We owe a rooster to Asclepius. Because I've just been healed. This almost makes me cry. I'm going to the place where I'm healed. Take the offering to the doctor god, because I'm healed. I'm better now. I'm gone. What I would like you guys to do, I want to tell you just a little bit about the Republic. We're going to start a new essay. It's going to end up being 3 weeks, because you guys meet next week and then you don't meet the next week. And I was going to give you 2 weeks, but it's going to end up being 3. It's fine. So this week you really don't have to do any writing per se, but you're going to compare Socrates and Christ. All right? And all I want you to do is just get a piece of paper and write down all the ways they're the same and the ways that you find them different. All right? And spend some time. Do it. Don't just sit down once over the week, but especially also as you continue to read about Socrates in the next book, in the next Plato that we're going to read. Tell me how they're alike and tell me how they're different. So all you're doing this week is jotting down ideas. Does everybody have that? You don't have to start arranging a paper or anything. We'll talk about that next week. Yes, Ethan? Yeah, how are Socrates and Christ the same and different? We're going to compare them. Yes, sir.
There were 2 questions.
Oh, yeah. Which ones?
What did the oracle state about Socrates' wisdom?
That he was the wisest man in Athens, but that he said he's not, but maybe he is the wisest because he's the only one who knows he doesn't know. So that section that I read.
And why did Socrates, in his divine voice, did not oppose
Oh,
his conviction?
I didn't read that because maybe this isn't a bad thing that's going to happen to him. And then notice I gave you Bible verses that I didn't go through in 1 Corinthians. You might want to read those if you didn't already as you jot down ideas. You're going to start the Republic. The Republic is probably Plato's most famous work. This is, I misspoke because last week I told Ethan, I remember that, next week you're going to read about justice, but you didn't. You read about piety. This week we really are reading about justice. Socrates is going to meet up with some friends down in the Piraeus, the harbor, and they're going to get started talking about what is justice. What does it mean to be a just person? And they decide, justice in a person is kind of hard to find, but what if we make up a city? Let's make up a city, because cities are big. And then we can look for justice in the city. And then we can extrapolate from that and see if we can find what justice would be in an individual person. So that is why it's called the Republic. It is the building of a hypothetical city in which we are looking for what justice is. Yes? Don't format. We'll talk about it next week. Just jot down ideas. Don't ask yourself to do anything. We're reading the first 3 books. All right? Remember, I don't remember how far that will take you into it, but you're going to read some pretty funky stuff in this hypothetical city. Try to remember that as far as we know, Plato was not saying we should make a city like this. They're just speculating, because what they really want to do is find justice. And then they're going to use where they find justice, and then they're going to look at an individual soul and see what justice is in the soul. Do you have a question, Kyle?
We've been doing Socrates and Christ. Are we comparing, since Socrates is not a god, Christ is God, and that are different beliefs and how...
Well, obviously that's a difference.
Yeah, that's different. So
But
are we going into the belief section? Or
yeah,
are we-
absolutely, absolutely. And their lives. Here, I'll give you one for free. Neither of them wrote anything down.
And also their effects on people. Each one of them were waking them up.
They were waking people up. Good say.
Only the students
Oh,
wrote that.
oh, yes.
Wait, what?
Their students. His students wrote stuff down. Plato wrote stuff down, yes. And Jesus' students, his disciples, wrote things down. Does that make sense? So you don't have to worry about formatting or anything. Just jot down ideas. Don't even have to be complete sentences. Just ideas, okay? And then I'll help you format it next week, and then you'll have the break, and we'll have 2 weeks to read, okay? Similar and differences. So you can make just 2 columns, alike, different, you know, if you want to, and just jot down ideas. And then we'll come maybe share some of them if we have time, or if anybody feels like, oh, I just feel like I need some help on this. I didn't really think of much. But I think once you get thinking about it, and after you read the 1 Corinthians, and probably from what we've talked about, I mean, even that death scene, right, where at the end he has only a few of his closest ones, you know, with him. And all those people that used to follow him around in Athens, the crowds that used to gather, they're not there. They ditched him. He was just a show for them. And Jesus was just a show sometimes, yes.
I heard that from the actual time he died, there's supposed to be like 14 people there, but the person who drew the painting put 12 people there.
Oh, his disciples, yes. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm sorry I kept you late again, but you guys have a good week. Thank you again.